the journey into the coffee world. First of all, let me start by saying Happy New Year to everybody. And I hope you had a fantastic Christmas and a festive season that was filled with joy, happiness with loved ones and family. The journey into the coffee world. How did I get into the coffee world and how did I get involved with coffee? I must say, I'll say it goes back about 10 years ago, really. So what happened at that time is around 2014 is I had been working in commodity trading. And then one day I just got communication. I think it was an email. It wasn't a phone call. The phone call came later. It was an email from a coffee merchant in London. And they were just inquiring if I could get my hands on some Zimbabwean coffee. And I responded, as you would if you're a commodity trader. If you ask anything, of course, you'll say you've got access to it. And a lady called me back, and then we spoke. And I did say, yeah, of course, I can go down to Zimbabwe and be in a position to see what I can get for this merchant in London. So I think a couple of months later, I got on a plane. I went to Zimbabwe with the sole purpose of finding out how much coffee I could get out of Zimbabwe. And prior to that, in the 2 months leading up to that, from the time the coffee merchant made contact, I had done my own research and I had established that there was a Zimbabwe coffee mill, which was still operational, but, somewhat at some skeletal level. So I went out, I made contact, I made appointments. I went out to be able to go down to Mtare to visit the guys at the Zimbabwe coffee mill and see what it is that we could get. So what happened was when I got to Harare, it then just happened that the then general manager of the Zimbabwe coffee mill had traveled to Harare. They were in the process of lobbying the government to invest in the revival of the coffee industry, or to be funding the small-scale coffee farmers again. And he had traveled with two gentlemen, one from Vumba and the other one was from Honde Valley, who were coffee growers, old men that had been growing coffee for quite a long time. So I made contact with them while I was in Harare. They said, no, we are in Harare. So we agreed to meet at the Holiday Inn along Samora Machel at the corner of 5th Street. So we met by the poolside and we started talking. And so the gentlemen started talking and they told their story. They told of what had happened to the industry since the land reform program in particular. And it is a part of the untold story of the land reform, what really happened to these guys. So because what used to happen, the structure of the coffee trade in Zimbabwe was that you would have this big commercial farmer, and then around that commercial farmer would be small-scale coffee farmers. So when the commercial farmer does his big harvest, the small-scale small-scale coffee farmers would bring in their own produce and then it would be aggregated, and that's how they would access the international markets. So once the disruptions happened and the commercial farmers were displaced, just to give you a measure, Zimbabwe had over 140 large-scale commercial coffee farmers, and after the land reform, you had sort of like one or two remaining. Sort of like individual, you still had the estates owned by the corporations, a couple of them still, but over 140 had left their farms. So that was their story. So they lost international markets, and if you understand anything about coffee, it has got such great traceability. It's very difficult to simply just turn up on the market with a coffee that nobody knows where it has come from. So one of the things that even we do, we are actually able to walk you back to the tree where the coffee that you are having came from. So because of that traceability, all the farms that were owned by commercial farmers became what was known in international trade as contested land. So coffee from there would not, even the resettled farmers, they would not be able to access international markets with it. So these farmers lost their route to market. So now they were there. If you want context again, at the peak of its power, Zimbabwe would do close to 15,000 tons of coffee. And after the land reform by around 2006, that had gone down to slightly over 100 tons. So from 15,000 tons to 100 tons in production, that's a collapse. You can't even say a near collapse. That's a total collapse of an industry. So this gentleman spoke. We sat there for 2 hours. And it is in those 2 hours that I said to myself, I'm abandoning all the other commodities that I was doing. I'd been involved in sugar. I was trying to do rice, tea, sesame seed, wheat, anything, any commodity, any agricultural commodity you can think of. I was trying to get involved in. So I said I would abandon everything, and my mission would be to work with these small-scale coffee farmers, and we would see what we can do, because there were efforts to revive the industry that had been initiated by the Zimbabwe Coffee Mill already. So, and I thought I could play a part, and that began my relationship with these small-scale coffee farmers. But I have to say, by the way, the mandate that I got from the merchant, I managed to get about 6 tons of coffee. But in coffee trade, for it to make sense, you need 19 tons, because a container, that's how much you can put in a container, and you can't put other products in a container. So whether you've got 6 tons or 19 tons, you still need a 20-foot container. So I managed to get 6 tons that needed to come to London. So I asked around, and I got a quotation of shipping a 20-foot container with 6 tons of coffee to London Gateway, and it didn't make economic sense. So I told the guys in London that this is where I am, and they said, no, it's not a problem. We have coffee coming out of Kenya, so as we can see from the map that it's just up the coastline from where Zimbabwe's coffee is. Yeah, it's just down to Beira, and then up the coast to Mombasa, and then we'll combine it with the coffee that is coming from there. It will come to London. So I made inquiries about shipping the 6 tons to Kenya, and this is one of the things that Africa needs to sort out, really. If as a continent it needs to, it has any hope of playing catch up or competing, because intra-Africa trade is hard. I mean, if you think that it was going to cost me 3 times more to ship something from Zimbabwe to Kenya than it would have to send the coffee from Zimbabwe to London, it just didn't make sense. So in the end, the short story of it is that I ended up not sending the coffee to London, the 6 tons. However, that started my journey in coffee. So I got back, and between 2014 and 2017, it was a period of just trying to find different ways, also studying the industry, making phone calls, attending these coffee events, just having conversations and trying to understand really how the industry is structured, and how we can come up with a strategy that would revive the Zimbabwe coffee industry. So I then came up with an idea that the best way we could perhaps help is maybe if we start some coffee shops, hoping to establish a chain of coffee shops that would then act as an off-taker, because you need to have a buyer, and then you can then ramp up production with a guaranteed buyer at the end of it. So in 2017, we opened the coffee shop in Coventry, and I soon realized that retail is hard. Tried it on a different location. That was a lot better. We did what we could, but eventually we needed to close that, and then COVID came, and and it's not something that personally I've thought I need to go back into. If we're going to go back into that space, that coffee shop space, it's got to be a totally different model. It's got to be backed by something else. So we've decided to settle on just roasting and selling to particularly the homebrew market and also to coffee shops that need some coffee. But that's how I ended up in coffee. It also helps that I loved a good coffee anyway. So what we have now is a very good relationship with farmers up and down the coffee belt, which stretches from Honde Valley in the north along the border with Mozambique, Zimbabwean border with Mozambique, through Avumba all the way down to Chimanimani and Chipinge. We have good relationships, particularly in Avumba and Honde Valley, and we've been establishing some good relationships in Chipinge. The issue with Chipinge is that most of the farmers that are operating there were resettled on farms that were taken away from commercial white farmers. So I think it's only in recent years that coffee coming from those farms is now back in the international fold. It can be sold again. The whole contested land argument has fallen away, which is good for the industry. So that's how I got into industry. Took me 10 minutes to explain that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So how did I end up in coffee? What was the movement from banking or financial? What was the movement from the financial industry to coffee? Okay. So I worked in the financial industry for a number of years. I actually started my career in Zimbabwe with one of the leading life insurers, working on the asset management side of that company. And before I moved to the UK at the turn of the century. So I did work until 2010. So what actually happened, this is a story perhaps for a different occasion, but I will tell it anyway. Sometime in the beginning of March in 2009, I got up in my house and I prepared to go to work. I used to work 45 minutes drive in traffic. So my routine was very straightforward. I get up, I get ready, and at exactly 8 o'clock, I stand in front of my TV. I switch on BBC News to catch 15 minutes, the 15-minute news cycle. Before at 1:15, I get out of the house and I drive to work, and I'll be at my desk for 9 o'clock. On this one morning, I think it was the 9th of March actually, in 2009, which coincided with the 9th of March, the day I actually landed in the UK in 2001. So I stood there, and as I was watching the news, there was breaking news read at the bottom of the screen, and the breaking news was that my workplace was going to shut down a number of their operations centers, and a number of people were going to lose their jobs in the process. That was news to me. Nobody had ever spoken to about anything like that at work. So so it was, you're finding this out on the news headlines. So I drove into work, and all the big guys had come down from HQ, and they addressed us. And apparently, a memo had leaked that was the intention of the organization. However, for me, it got me thinking. It got me thinking that, I mean, for as long as I'm an expense, as long as I am a cost to a business, of which that's what you are if you're an employee. And any business that when it's hit with some kind of financial trouble, the first thing it does is to cut costs. And if you're an employee, you can be considered a cost, and you sit on the other side of the balance sheet. So effectively, because you're an expense, they will think to to downsize you. So that was a decision that had been made by this this institution I was working for, one of the largest in the world. That was triggered by the financial crisis that had happened 2 years earlier, of course. It had quite some devastating effect, not just on the banking sector, but the whole global economy. So that was early March in 2009, and then conversations. There were options to relocate to another city, but I thought to myself, and then what? So I resolved at that moment that I would leave formal employment, and then I would just venture into the world of trying to see what it is that I can do. So nearly a year later, in February of 2010, I left the financial industry for the very last time, and I was determined never to come back. So so in February 2010, I left, and in March, end of March, I was back in Zimbabwe. I had gained a lot of experience working in the financial industry, and of course, you want to go back home and you want to introduce concepts, you want to share your experience, you want to transform the industry. So I went back. I actually relocated to Zimbabwe in 2010, and I was there. It coincided with the Government of National Unity, the GNU. So things were good. Things were good at that time. The US dollar had been implemented. The multi-currency regime had been implemented. And so things were good. And I stayed there for 2 years. But it got harder as the time progressed. By the time we got to 2012, it was very clear that the bigger party in the political setup was determined to retain 100% control of power in the next general election that was to come in 2013. And, things just got too political and became too toxic, and things just started spiraling again. I thought, look, it's not going to work. I'm going to go back to the UK. So I upped again and came back to the UK. And it is at that time, then I thought, what do I do? I had vowed that I would never go back into the financial industry. So commodity trading then happened to be kind of a halfway house, I'll call it that. But at least the difference now is there is some finance related, financial structuring related that with commodity trading, but at least there's a physical product. It is now different to when you're in banking. You're just looking at this long list of zeros, millions and billions of people's money, but you don't know, they are just account numbers. They're just account numbers. There's no human aspect. There's no physical relationship that is coming, that you sense or that you feel. But with commodities, it is a product. It's a tangible product. It is coffee. It is wheat. It is sugar. It is and you're structuring something, and then you're going, and somebody's receiving a product, and somebody's getting paid. So it became a halfway house. So I settled in that. I did a few things. Created a few relationships, particularly in the UAE, in Dubai. So a couple of interesting trades that I did, and then I did that until I then had that meeting with the coffee farmers in 2014, which then made me abandon everything and focus on coffee. So that's how I ended up in coffee. That's my journey into the coffee industry. Plans for 2025. 2025 is going to be a big year for Zimbabwean coffee, and I'll tell you why. One of the things that you need to understand about coffee, and this has been found out through research, is that for any producing country to really benefit from coffee, they must have a decent amount of domestic consumption. So that's why you get places like Ethiopia doing so well, even economically, is because they've got such a huge domestic consumption culture within their country. Unfortunately for Zimbabwe, the culture has not been so well defined. Zimbabwe exports probably close to 98% of the coffee that is produced by the small scale coffee farmers, but you can't say there's no coffee consumption in Zimbabwe, because if you go to Bon Marché or Pick and Pay or OK, you go to the sector with the coffee. Coffee covers as much shelf space in terms of percentage as you would see in any supermarket in the UK, whether it's Sainsbury's, Tesco, Morrison's, or whatever. So there is somebody consuming coffee in Zimbabwe, but the problem in Zimbabwe is that the culture is not well defined. And the coffee goes out, it's processed elsewhere, comes back via South Africa, branded differently. That's the instant variety anyway. But there is consumption in Zimbabwe. So what we have seen as necessary is to have a defined coffee culture, and that's where we are coming in through Changamire Coffee Company. So we're going to be establishing operations in Zimbabwe in 2025, and that's something that we're really excited about, because I think we've laid down the foundation for such an investment to happen now. And so one of the things that we're doing is that we are going to be sponsoring the first ever barista competition. We are calling it the Zimbabwe Barista Throwdown 2025, and we've already had some exciting entries. We're going to start with a provincial roadshow that will start in mid-April, running into mid-May, and then we're going to have a period from mid-May until end of August, where we are just going to be doing a lot of work with the coffee, with coffee participants, with the roasters, coffee shops, and anybody else interested in the industry. We are then going to have the first ever Zimbabwe Coffee Festival, and this is an international festival which is going to attract players from abroad, so that we can really ride this fifth wave coffee specialty market that is growing very fast, and Zimbabwe is really poised to take advantage of that, anchored or backed by our small-scale coffee farmers. So what we have in 2025 is, as Changamire, we've got some space in Vumba that we've secured, where we're going to be putting a Changamire Coffee Resort. And the resort is going to be an experiential resort. We're going to be doing coffee tourism. We're going to be doing coffee experiences, coffee masterclasses, and everything else that comes with the coffee industry is going to be taking place there. And we're also going to be holding the International Coffee Festival at the resort. That will be end of August, going into early September in 2025. So those are the sort of like a summary of the plans that we have for 2025. But we're coming in big, and we want to partner with Zimbabwe's corporate world. There are fantastic opportunities for any industry, really, whether obviously hospitality, tourism sector, financial sector, manufacturing, any industry you can think of has got a space in coffee. There's something that they can benefit or derive from coffee. A great benefit to their brands, a great benefit towards the value they can generate. So that's what we're doing in 2025. I'm obviously going to need to talk more about it separately, because of the commercial nature of those initiatives. But it's one of those things that I'm excited about. It's really a journey I am looking forward to, and the interactions that we've had with a lot of baristas that are just in Zimbabwe. Most of them have worked in Cape Town in South Africa before, and they've gone back to Zimbabwe. We've got some that are in as far as the Middle East, and they are keen to come back and serve the industry and be a part of any revolution that is happening. And it is a revolution. And all I can say for now is stay connected. Let's do this. Let's see how far it takes us. Zimbabwe is ready, and I think the market is ready. You just need to go around the new shopping malls and see the type of coffee shops that are being put out there. And you don't need anything else to let you know that Zimbabwe is ready to have a coffee culture of its own that can stand out and attract people from all over the world to experience. So that's what we're doing in 2025.